Zion's shoe blowout wasn't an accident. The theory says Nike didn't just have a faulty shoe. Some fans and analysts think the malfunction was either preventable or even staged to shift product attention. Zion Williamson, a college megastar in 2019, was wearing the Nike PG 2.5, a shoe never built for someone with his combination of size and force. He was 285 pounds with an explosive first step. The shoe was designed for Paul George, who's lighter, less powerful, and plays a different style. When Zion's foot burst through the shoe less than 30 seconds into the Duke, North Carolina game, it looked bizarre. Analysts broke down the frame-by-frame footage and noticed the material gave way with almost no resistance. Some pointed to Nike using thinner mesh and synthetic layering around the forefoot flex zone. High-level motion studies showed Zion generated over 4,000 newtons of lateral force, more than twice what the shoe had ever been tested for. Yet Nike had signed a deal with Duke, supplying shoes they knew couldn't handle him. What makes it a theory? Nike's stock dropped nearly $2 billion the next day. They quietly reinforced the shoe line after the blowout. No major public recall, no clear admission, just updates and silence. The theory's not about sabotage, it's about calculated risk and poor judgment. The NCAA doesn't want mid-majors to win. The theory claims the NCAA subtly rigs the system against mid-major programs to keep blue bloods in power. It's not about conspiracies behind closed doors, it's about the structure. First, look at the selection process. The selection committee uses metrics like net rankings and quadrant wins, which are heavily weighted toward teams in power conferences. Mid-majors rarely get chances for Quadrant 1 games because top teams won't schedule them, and without those wins, they're barely considered. Even when mid-majors dominate their own conferences, they often end up with worse seeds. In 2023, Florida Atlantic went 31-3 and still got a 9 seed. Meanwhile, power conference teams with 10 or more losses regularly snag higher spots. That's not just favoritism, that's baked-in bias. Then there's the officiating. Data shows mid-major teams are called for more fouls when facing high-major opponents, especially late in tight tournament games. Some officials come from conferences with strong ties to the power structure. It's subtle, but the pattern's real. And broadcasting? The NCAA sets prime slots for name-brand schools. That's where the money flows. So the theory isn't that mid-majors can't win. They do, but the system makes sure it's rare. The tournament needs upsets, but it doesn't want new champions. Feel free to smash that like and subscribe button for more content like this. Anyways, UNC's academic scandal was quietly buried. The theory says the University of North Carolina's academic fraud case didn't get the punishment it deserved because the NCAA didn't want to damage a marquee basketball brand. From 1993 to 2011, thousands of UNC athletes, especially in football and men's basketball, took fake paper classes in the African and Afro-American Studies department. These were courses that never met, were graded based on one paper, and were overseen by a department administrator, not faculty. Internal UNC investigations showed over 3,000 students enrolled, nearly half of them athletes. But when the NCAA finally completed its investigation in 2017, it claimed it couldn't punish UNC because non-athletes also took the classes. That technicality let the program off the hook. The theory centers on how the NCAA treated this differently from other cases. Schools like Memphis and USC were hit hard for much smaller infractions. At UNC, no banners were taken down, no tournament wins were vacated, and no postseason bans were handed out. The NCAA passed the buck to the university, which had every reason to minimize the damage. Critics say if a mid-major had pulled the same stunt, the hammer would have dropped. The lack of consequences turned a massive academic scandal into a quiet shrug. Jalen Suggs' buzzer beater was scripted for drama. The theory says Suggs' iconic shot in the 2021 Final Four wasn't just a miracle, it was perfectly timed theater the NCAA wanted. Gonzaga was undefeated, and UCLA, an 11 seed, had made a surprise run. The game was wild. Tied at 90, Suggs banked in a running three from near half court as time expired. It looked too perfect. That's where the theory starts. Fans dug into the clock freeze. The game clock appeared stuck at 3 seconds before starting again, giving Gonzaga just enough time to push the ball up. There wasn't an official timeout, yet everyone seemed ready for the moment, and the camera work? It followed Suggs from catch to release like a movie scene, with no shaky cuts. Critics pointed at the way the defense reacted. UCLA didn't press or foul, even with a foul to give. They backed off, letting Suggs get a clean look. Analysts later called it a defensive lapse, but some believed it felt staged. And the aftermath. Instant highlight reel. The NCAA used it everywhere: commercials, promos, interviews. It boosted ratings, helped Gonzaga's story, and gave the tournament its viral clip. Whether or not it was scripted, everything lined up too cleanly. That's why some call it basketball's most perfectly produced moment. Blue Bloods get favorable officiating. The theory argues that teams like Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, and North Carolina consistently benefit from referee decisions, especially in tight tournament games, and the numbers do make people raise eyebrows. Between 2010 and 2020, Duke attempted more free throws than their opponents in 15 of 20 NCAA tournament games decided by fewer than 10 points. That's not random. Analysts have reviewed foul disparity rates, and blue blood programs often show lower foul counts even when playing aggressive defense. In games where possession stats show equal contact rates, these teams still manage to stay out of foul trouble. One study covering 15 seasons found that in one-possession games during March Madness, top-seeded programs received nearly 60% of all foul calls in the final 2 minutes. Then there's the eye test. Remember the 2017 title game? Gonzaga was called for 26 fouls. North Carolina only 20. It got so choppy, even neutral commentators were calling it unwatchable. And late calls often seem to go one way. Blocking instead of charging, contact waved off as play on, but only when the blue bloods are involved. The theory is not that referees are paid off, it's that they protect prestige. Big programs mean big audiences. And the NCAA doesn't mind a familiar name cutting the nets in April. Brandon Miller was protected by Alabama and the NCAA. The theory says both the university and the NCAA shielded Miller from real consequences during a criminal investigation to protect Alabama's tournament chances. In January of 2023, Miller brought a firearm to teammate Darius Miles, who then allegedly used it in a fatal shooting. Law enforcement confirmed Miller delivered the weapon, but wasn't charged with a crime. What raised eyebrows was how quickly Alabama kept him on the court. He missed 0 games. The athletic department called him a cooperative witness and left it at that. Coach Nate Oates downplayed everything in early press conferences, calling it wrong place, wrong time, and then had to walk those comments back. But the damage control worked. Miller stayed the face of a top-seeded team. The NCAA never stepped in. No eligibility review, no public statements. Meanwhile, other players have been suspended for far less. Unverified benefits, missed classes, even posting on social media. Critics said it sent a message: if you're a star on a title contender, the rules bend. Alabama knew they had a Final Four roster. The NCAA knew the ratings boost Miller brought. So the theory says both looked the other way, letting public outrage fade while the games went on. The one-and-done rule helped blue bloods dominate. The theory says when the NBA required players to be 1 year removed from high school before entering the draft, starting in 2006, it gave power programs a huge edge. Before the rule, top prospects could skip college entirely, but once forced into the system, they mostly landed with the same schools: Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina. These programs already had elite recruiting networks and shoe company relationships. Once the one-and-done window opened, they loaded up. Kentucky had 5 freshmen taken in the first round of the 2010 draft. Duke won a title in 2015 with 3 one-and-dones leading the way. No mid-major could replicate that because top recruits didn't want to waste their one college year in a small program. The theory digs into draft data. From 2006 through 2020, over 75% of one-and-done lottery picks came from a small circle of blue blood schools. That's not coincidence, it's consolidation, and coaches with NBA pipelines had a selling point others didn't. Players weren't picking schools for development, they were picking launch pads. Smaller programs were left to develop older players while the blue bloods turned into temporary holding pens for lottery talent. The rule didn't balance college basketball, it made the rich even richer. UCLA's 2021 Cinderella run was influenced by TV desires. The theory says the NCAA subtly benefited from pushing a recognizable brand, like UCLA, deep into the tournament, even when their seed and record didn't justify it. UCLA barely made the field in 2021. They lost 4 straight heading into the tournament and had to win a play-in game, just to make the round of 64. But then came a sudden shift. Their games were close, dramatic, and always in prime time. Against Michigan State, there were controversial foul calls late, all going UCLA's way. Versus Alabama, Alabama missed 7 free throws and had 2 starters foul out in overtime. Analysts noticed how possession reviews kept breaking in favor of UCLA at critical moments. By the time they played Michigan, the fouls again leaned toward UCLA. Michigan, a number 1 seed, was held to under 50 points. not just by defense, but by rhythm-breaking calls that slowed the game. UCLA wasn't even in the top 25 before the tournament, yet they were showcased like a heavyweight. The theory doesn't claim the games were fixed. It argues the narrative was just too perfect. A struggling blue blood clawing back, winning thrillers, and grabbing headlines every step of the way. TV ratings surged, the brand was back, and the NCAA got exactly what it needed. Greg Oden was way older than claimed. The theory says Oden, who dominated college basketball at Ohio State in 2007, wasn't actually 19 like official records claimed. He was older, possibly by several years. The idea started with how physically mature he looked. At 17, he was 6 feet 11 inches, 270 pounds, and had a full beard and deep voice. Photos from high school show him towering over peers, with features some called man-like. Critics pointed to inconsistencies in early documents. He was born in Buffalo but grew up in Indiana after moving from New York at a young age. Early school records were hard to trace, and age verification isn't exactly tight in American youth sports. There were no official NCAA age audits unless eligibility violations were suspected, and none ever surfaced in Oden's case. Medical analysts also noted Oden dealt with knee and foot issues usually found in older athletes. By 25, his body had already broken down after multiple microfracture surgeries. Some believed that that level of physical decline didn't match his supposed age. The theory isn't widely accepted, but it's stubborn. It hinges on the idea that either Oden's records were flawed or someone fudged paperwork during his youth career, and once he made it big, nobody wanted to dig deeper. Kemba Walker's 2011 Madness run saved the Big East. The theory says Walker's wild run through the 2011 postseason didn't just win games, it stopped the Big East from collapsing early. That year, UConn played 5 games in 5 days to win the conference tournament, then rattled off 6 straight in the NCAA to win it all. The timing couldn't have been better. The Big East had been wobbling. With conference realignment already heating up, member schools were eyeing exits. West Virginia, Syracuse, and Pittsburgh were already rumored to be looking elsewhere. A weak postseason showing that year would have only sped things up, but Kemba's tier flipped the story. He beat ranked teams daily in the Big East tourney, including a buzzer beater against Pittsburgh that instantly became a highlight staple. In the big tournament, UConn wasn't even a top 3 seed from the conference, yet they carried the Big East banner deep into April, beating Kentucky and Butler along the way. The title win gave the conference a powerful PR boost at a critical moment. The theory says the NCAA and TV networks leaned into Kemba's story hard because it helped stabilize a crumbling structure. UConn's miracle run delayed the breakup. It gave the Big East one last blast of dominance before the exits started rolling in. The selection committee builds matchups for ratings. The theory says the NCAA selection committee doesn't just seed teams based on merit, they shape the bracket to create drama, rivalries, and big market clashes that boost viewership. Officially, the bracket's built on NET rankings, strength of schedule, and team records. But year after year, fans spot too many convenient coincidences. In 2014, Wichita State went undefeated, got a 1 seed, and was rewarded with Kentucky, Louisville, and Michigan in their region, all traditional powers with huge fan bases. In 2019, Michigan and Michigan State were placed in the same region, despite ranking in the top 5 nationally. Even first-round matchups raise eyebrows. In 2021, Texas faced Abilene Christian, a perfect Texas versus Texas setup for regional ratings. The committee denies it every time, but former members have admitted bracket storylines get discussed. They can't say it outright, but they don't hide from it either. TV contracts with CBS and Turner are worth billions. More eyes mean more money. The theory doesn't claim the whole bracket is rigged. It says certain matchups are massaged to create moments. It's not random that blue bloods land near each other or that mid-majors end up facing impossible paths. It's organized chaos, just enough to feel fair while keeping the drama tuned for primetime. Arizona was protected in the FBI scandal. The theory says when the FBI uncovered widespread corruption in college basketball in 2017, Arizona should have taken major damage, but somehow walked away mostly untouched. Federal wiretaps and testimony revealed that Arizona assistant coach Emmanuel Book Richardson accepted money to steer players toward agents and financial advisors. More damning was the allegation that head coach Sean Miller was caught on a wiretap discussing a $100,000 payment to secure DeAndre Ayton. Ayton still played every game. Arizona never self-imposed a postseason ban, and Miller wasn't suspended. Meanwhile, other programs named in the scandal, like Louisville and Oklahoma State, took major hits. Louisville vacated wins. Oklahoma State got a postseason ban, but Arizona, they wrote it out and quietly moved on. The theory points to the handling of evidence. The NCAA didn't get access to the wiretaps. The federal trial produced headline quotes, but no public release of recordings. Arizona's administration backed Miller all the way, and when he finally left in 2021, he wasn't fired for cause. He walked with a payout. Critics say the NCAA looked the other way because hammering a major West Coast brand would have meant fewer ratings, fewer stars, and a legal mess. The system flexed just enough to keep Arizona on the board. Grayson Allen was shielded because he played for Duke. The theory says Allen, known for multiple tripping incidents during his college career, avoided serious punishment because he wore a Duke jersey. Between 2015 and 2017, Allen tripped at least 3 opposing players during high-profile games. Video evidence was clear. He extended his leg, made contact, and then acted like nothing happened. Yet the NCAA stayed silent. Duke handled it internally. After the third incident, they suspended him for 1 game, not even a full week, and he remained team captain. Coach Mike Krzyzewski said Allen felt bad and framed it as a learning experience. Meanwhile, players from less prominent programs have been benched longer for less. The theory leans on how media coverage and official responses felt watered down. Pundits called it immature instead of dirty. The Atlantic Coast Conference never issued penalties, and despite the incidents, Allen never lost his starting spot, never faced suspension from the league, and never missed March Madness. Fans believe if Allen had played for a mid-major, he would have been labeled a cheap shot artist and suspended for weeks. But Duke's brand, Coach K's legacy, and Allen's talent kept him protected. The system didn't stop the behavior, it just downplayed it. Kansas's 2022 title was a makeup for the FBI investigation. The theory says the NCAA eased Kansas's path in 2022 as quiet compensation after years of being dragged through the mud during the federal corruption probe. Kansas was one of the central programs named. Adidas reps testified they funneled money to recruits with the knowledge of Kansas staff, but instead of postseason bans or title vacating, the school skated past serious penalties. Right before the 2022 tournament, Kansas still had unresolved infractions hanging over its head, yet they were given a number 1 seed with a region that some analysts called one of the softest in recent history. Their biggest challenge before the Final Four? A Creighton team missing 2 starters. Bill Self had been coaching under a cloud for years, but that year, everything fell into place. No in-season distractions, no suspensions. The infractions case was pushed off until after the tournament. The NCAA avoided announcing anything that might take attention off the games. Then came the win. Kansas raised a banner and the headline shifted. The theory says the NCAA wanted closure. Instead of punishing a blue blood, they helped frame a redemption arc. Let them win, clean it up later, and move the spotlight away from the corruptions mess. The transfer portal is a legal form of pay-to-play. The theory says the modern transfer portal, mixed with name, image, and likeness money, has turned college basketball into a bidding war disguised as player freedom. Since the portal's rule changes in 2020, players can switch schools without sitting out a year. That's led to record-high transfers, over 1,500 per offseason, and a feeding frenzy from coaches and boosters. Now, players don't just transfer for playing time or fit, they're recruited with NIL deals already in place. Mid-major standouts are especially targeted. A player averages 20 points for a smaller school. A power conference program can offer 6 figures in NIL money and a larger stage. It's legal, it's happening, and it's unregulated. The theory says schools have built entire departments around managing NIL opportunities, often backed by donor collectives. These aren't independent companies. They're deeply tied to the programs. One top transfer in 2023 admitted he picked his new team based on the full package, and that package included cash. It's not against the rules, but it bends the idea of amateurism past recognition. The portal was supposed to create fairness. Instead, it created a marketplace. Now, players follow the money and the highest bidder usually wins. Duke's loss to Lehigh was a message from the NCAA. The theory says the shocking 2012 tournament upset wasn't just March randomness, it was the NCAA reminding Duke that no one's untouchable. At the time, Duke was under scrutiny for its growing influence over college basketball, from media deals to recruiting power. Coach Mike Krzyzewski had built a program that many saw as too close to the establishment, too protected. Then came the game. Duke entered as a number 2 seed, Lehigh as a 15. CJ McCollum exploded for 30 points, but analysts noticed more than just a hot hand. Duke looked off, foul calls were oddly timed. Their defense couldn't get stops, and there were few adjustments, no late-game whistle bailouts that high seeds usually benefit from. The theory highlights how Duke got no help from officials, a rare thing. It was one of the only times under Krzyzewski that a questionable block charge call didn't go his way in crunch time, and it happened on a national broadcast, in prime time, with full media coverage. Critics say the NCAA wanted to signal that even the most powerful programs had to play ball, literally and politically. Letting Duke fall sent a message without needing sanctions. The upset became more than an upset, it became a warning. The 2013 Louisville title was unfairly erased. The theory argues the NCAA overreached when it stripped Louisville of its 2013 championship, making them the only team to lose a men's basketball title for off-court violations. The punishment stemmed from a sex scandal involving former staffer Andre McGee, who arranged escorts for recruits between 2010 and 2014, but none of the violations directly involved players from the championship team. The investigation confirms some recruits received improper benefits before enrolling, but no ineligible players were found on the roster during the title run. That's the key point in the theory. Louisville won on the court, within the rules of play, with players who had academic and eligibility clearance. Yet in 2018, the NCAA forced the school to vacate 123 wins, including the title and 2 Final Four appearances. Coaches have committed worse violations, under-the-table payments, fake classes, forged transcripts, and still kept banners. The theory says the NCAA made an example out of Louisville because the details were salacious and media-friendly. Critics argue it wasn't about fairness, it was about optics. The NCAA used Louisville to prove it could clean up college sports, even if that meant erasing a title the players earned legally on the court. Certain teams fake injuries to preserve eligibility. The theory says some programs exaggerate or invent injuries to sideline players without burning a year of eligibility, using the medical redshirt loophole as a roster management tool. According to NCAA rules, if a player appears in less than 30% of a season and suffers a documented injury, they can apply for a medical hardship waiver and get that year back. Convenient, right? Analysts notice patterns. Star freshmen struggle early, then suddenly get shut down with vague injuries like lower leg discomfort or nonspecific soreness. Teams release almost no medical details, and players often stay active on social media, looking completely healthy. By benching them early, coaches get an extra year to develop the talent without losing a season on paper. The theory gained steam when high-profile prospects began reappearing a year later, stronger, more polished, and still listed as freshmen. It's legal, as long as the paperwork checks out. But with no independent medical oversight, teams basically police themselves. Critics argue it's just strategic tanking. Instead of wasting a season with inconsistent play, coaches stash the asset and reset. The rules were designed to protect players, but some teams treat them like loopholes in a video game. The result? A quiet roster advantage nobody wants to admit. The 2020 tournament was canceled to avoid embarrassing blue bloods. The theory says the NCAA used the COVID-19 pandemic as a convenient excuse to cancel the 2020 tournament, right as several blue blood programs were spiraling. For the first time in decades, powerhouses like North Carolina, Kentucky, and Michigan State were either underperforming or not even projected to make the field. Duke, usually a top seed, was inconsistent and outside the top 10. Bracketologists had teams like Dayton and San Diego State as projected 1 seeds, with Kansas and Baylor topping most rankings. That meant a strong chance for a Final Four with almost no blue blood representation. TV ratings, likely to drop. Ticket sales, a risk. The tournament was shaping up to be mid-major heavy, and that didn't fit the NCAA's usual marketing script. The official reason for canceling was health and safety, but the timing of the call, made just days before Selection Sunday, felt rushed to some. Other pro leagues postponed seasons instead of outright canceling them. The NCAA didn't wait. No bracket was even released. No simulated draw, just a clean wipe. The theory says the NCAA didn't want a Cinderella-heavy tournament exposing a weak year for their cash cow programs. A canceled tournament protected legacies and let the machine reboot without a messy, upset-filled bracket haunting their highlight reels. Oscar Tshiebwe was misled by Kentucky's NIL promises. The theory says Kentucky used the promise of massive name, image, and likeness earnings to keep Tshiebwe in college for the 2022 season, only for the reality to fall far short. After winning National Player of the Year, Tshiebwe faced a decision: enter the draft or return. Kentucky boosters and staff hinted he could earn 7 figures if he stayed. That kept him off the draft board. But foreign-born players face strict visa limits. Tshiebwe, from the Democratic Republic of Congo couldn't legally participate in most NIL activities while on a student visa. Kentucky publicly acknowledged this but never adjusted expectations. They leaned into the hype, even promoting deals they knew had restrictions. The theory says Kentucky sold Chibwe on NIL, riches they couldn't actually deliver. He ended up with less access to endorsements, limited appearances, and had to travel outside the country to film ads. Meanwhile, other domestic players signed major deals with fewer hoops. Critics say Kentucky gambled with Chibwe's future. Instead of guiding him to the draft after a dominant season, they pulled him back with promises built on shaky ground. And the NCAA? They never clarified NIL rules for international players, keeping the loophole alive. Feel free to smash that like and subscribe button for more content like this.